Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our Sales Geek webinar. This is the art of building rapport and trust, and I'm delighted that you could join us today. We have a world-class panel who I'm really looking forward to introducing you to. They're expert sales leaders and sales geeks across the USA, and it's a real pleasure to have them on board. And thank you for joining us today. It's going to be an excellent call. We can really discuss and get into building quality relationships that last with your customers using the art of trust and rapport. So without further ado, allow me to introduce Jerry. Hi, Jerry.
How you doing, Owen? Thanks for having me. So
Just
Jerry Ewalt, the CEO of Sales Geek Southern, which covers Kentucky, Tennessee, Mississippi, and Alabama.
brilliant. Thank you. Brian, I'll come to you next.
Awesome. Thanks, Owen. Yeah, coming to you from Fort Collins, Colorado. 30 years sales and marketing guy. Now a sales geek here in Colorado. And yeah, excited to be part of it.
Great. Thanks, Brian. And then Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Owen. Ben Kinning. I'm a franchise owner based in Denver, Colorado.
That's great. It's great to have you all on board and be here today. So the format for today is really going to be a panel discussion. We're going to get into a deep dive of this topic, really exploring how we can build rapport and trust and ask the experts, and I'll make sure to be handling as many questions as I can to them. In our recent webinar series from Sales Geek, we spent a lot of time talking around the changes to sales, particularly around AI, and what's going to be the fundamental shift. But what we're talking about today is really a human skill, and certainly one we're not seeing on the horizon that's going to be replaced by tech anytime soon. Sales is still and has always been a person-to-person endeavor, and this is only going to confirm and get more so over time. So how do we build that level of trust and rapport when we're having that conversation with customers? But as a bit of an icebreaker, a bit of a start off, I just want to ask the panel, what's the worst sales experience you've ever had? But also, what's the best sales experience you've ever had? Let's start there. Let's go through the good and bad of sales. Who wants to kick us off with this one?
Sure,
Jerry?
I'm happy to jump in and say
Great,
it first. So I would say one of the worst experiences as a salesperson you run into is when the first question out of the gate and immediately the conversation is just give me a price quote. What's the price for your service? It's never an understanding of what you do and how you can support, how you can help, anything. It is just a race to the bottom on price, and that makes it a very difficult conversation. Now, what I would say is some of the best conversations I've had is when the entire conversation, you have an hour dedicated for someone and you're spending 58 minutes really understanding exactly what challenges that they're having and really understanding their experience. And then it makes it a lot easier as a salesperson to come back with a better solution when you get that information.
Absolutely there, Ben. So really trying to understand things from their perspective is a fundamental part of what we're going to be talking about today. And move us beyond those conversations around cost. Jerry, I'm going to come to you. What's your best and worst experiences?
Yeah, this is, I'll just build off what Ben just said, because this is one of my favorite topics in sales, right? Or in sales leadership, is how do you build rapport? So some of the worst experiences that I had in sales is when you try to connect with a customer or even a team member that you're trying to lead, and you're trying to build that rapport, and they just get right down to the point. I think, Ben, you said it, what is the price of this? Or they're not hearing what you're saying, right? So you're trying to listen at the same time, but they're just not hearing what you're saying, and they're just fixated on that price or whatever that they're fixated on. They're not building a rapport, a two-way conversation between two human beings, right? So that's always the worst. And then you can flip it on the other side of it and say, what's the best of that? It's when you're able to build that rapport and you have those conversations. And we've all been there where, the sales call maybe takes longer than you expect. Because you're enjoying it. You're genuinely enjoying having a conversation with that individual, and you just feeding off each other's energy, and that's going to result in a sale, which is a good thing for us, but also a good thing for that customer, because that they're going to love it. Whatever it is you're selling, that product or selling, they're going to love it and they're going to enjoy it, and that's going to be a repeat customer.
Absolutely, Jerry. And that's what we want to get to as salespeople, right? Enjoying those calls. Brian, how about yourself?
Yeah, you know what? I spent many years with Black and Decker, and I think one of the things as a sales manager, one of the worst things is to be with a sales rep that is literally just trying to go through the steps of a call in about 2 minutes, right? And they just try to race through everything, and there's no, they're not listening to they're not even really sure what the questions are, and they're not really listening to the answers. They're just trying to get through, the steps of a call, and those can be certainly nerve-wracking and challenging as a sales manager, and also for a salesperson for that matter. But it certainly doesn't do anything for your customer. And then I think the best, situations I've been in, and it depends on where you're at with your sales. If you're, if it's a quick sales cycle or a longer sales cycle where you're building trust over a long time. But I had the opportunity to call on Walmart at a part of my career, and I think once you understand your customer and you understand what makes things work for your customer because you're listening and you're building that rapport over time. I remember we closed some really great deals with Walmart because we just knew how to sell to them and we knew what was important to them. So that trust factor worked there. Those are a lot of fun, right? Because you can really move the needle if you really are in line with what your customer needs.
Brilliant. Well, thank you all. That's a great start to this conversation. You can see from our panel some of the expertise and things we're going to be talking about today. I realize I didn't introduce myself at the start, so let me go back to that. So that I'm Owen Phillips. I'm the head of global marketing here at Sales Geek. And I was saying just before the panel started, I would love opportunities like this to be on these webinars to actually learn from our amazing Sales Geek at the same time. So I bring a marketing perspective, but I love hearing about the sales perspective, a part of that sales process, as my roles used to be in sales as well. So let's move along here. So I'm going to focus on what we're going to cover today in this session. And we've anywhere between 45 minutes and an hour for this session as one of our lunchtime learns. So what we hope by the end of this session is you'll be able to understand the meaning of building rapport and trust and how to leverage it, learn the 3 C's of trust and how to demonstrate vulnerability to build trust. And we'll explore what that involves, and to hear from these experts and how to put all of it into practice. So let's start with, what is rapport? And that subconscious feeling of connection, trust, or simply feeling that you are being understood. So let's dig a little deeper into that with some definitions. At its core, rapport is about making the other person feel seen, heard, and understood. And it's, as I mentioned before, a human-to-human connection. And it's going to be built on empathy and active listening and shared understanding. Whereas trust takes this rapport further. It's a second step in this process, and it's earned over time and through consistent behavior, honesty, and competence. And it's not something that's just going to be instantly given, but can be very quickly lost if we break down within this process. So what I want to get to is that these are not so much soft skills, but power skills that we need to learn as sales professionals. Not just to close deals, but build relationship. And as Brian mentioned, for repeat business, for referrals and customer advocacy. So my questions to the panel, I want to start with, in your experience, what's the moment when rapport clicks in a sales conversation? What is that key moment, do you think? Brian, I'll come to you first on this.
Yeah, no, Owen, that's a good question. I think there's a common thing within sales and buying is that you feel like you're on the other side of the desk, right? You're the buyer's on one side, a salesperson's on the other side, and there's a little bit of this jousting that goes back and forth within the sales process. I think where the magic happens if you can kind of be on the same side of the desk, right? Where you truly are a partner, a business partner, a trusted partner. Then you're on the same side of the desk. You're working for similar and same goals. I think that's when all of a sudden you're like, okay, we've moved past this kind of gate that may be between a buyer and a seller.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
To piggyback off of that, Brian, in my experience, what I've seen is when someone truly feels heard for the first time. I think a lot of times people are used to not being understood. A lot of people just listen with the intention of responding and not truly understanding. So when someone's a part of a conversation and they're like, ah, yes, you get me. You understand what I'm trying to say. That's when rapport I start to see really connect with people.
That's good, Ben.
Yeah, there's an emotional intelligence piece to this, right? Of being able to kind of see a person's biolanguage or the reflection in their voice and stuff like that, because that probably happens at a different moment in the conversation. Can happen early, a little bit later on. So I think there's some techniques and skills that you can kind of practice to get that person to have that rapport with you earlier on in the conversation. A lot of that has, and I think we're going to go through a lot of this, Owen, like mirroring and being able to kind of connect with that person. So I think that's a skill that's practiced a bit over time.
Yeah, absolutely. And my next question, I think, has been answered by what we've said here, which is, do you think rapport has become more or less important in today's sales world? But I'm going to rephrase that from what we've just said around emotional intelligence. How important has it become in that sales process?
Yeah, I'll keep going and then you guys jump in. But I think it's more important now, right? In Sales Geek, right, you're working with a lot of different businesses, and as you do that, every business has different systems and operations and IT structures and all this stuff, and so you kind of get lost in the machine, if you will, right? And you know, even right now we're on a webinar instead of in an audience in a room, so you've got to be really focused on the interacting with people and being able to see their reaction, their facial expressions, and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's even more important. We get lost in that and we feel lost and we feel like we're not being heard because so often we're talking to a computer or a bot or AI or whatever it might be. So I think it's even more important.
Yeah, Jerry, I would agree. I think that when we're out talking to customers, that's where the real stuff happens. It doesn't happen over email. It doesn't happen, with kind of a lot of this digital networking that we have today. It's all super important and there's a lot we can learn from it. But when you can finally get somebody to sit down with you and you can have that one-on-one conversation, and I think Ben hit it and hit it really well. The real magic happens when somebody feels special or heard and they don't feel like they're part of a mass audience. Because a lot of the things we get today is very mass. We get an email that goes out to a lot of people and you're trying to go, well, that's not me, you know, entirely. I'm different. I'm more special than just what you're trying to tell me in this email. So I think getting to that one-on-one kind of conversation is super important and leveraging it.
Mhm.
Yeah, agreed. Especially with AI and advancement, as Jerry and Brian had said, it's a lot of just automation of top of funnel work where it's just a pitch based approach, or a lot of businesses are also outsourcing top of funnel activity to call centers, where it's just a turn and burn trying to get an appointment set activity. As things move towards more of that direction, people are just going to naturally crave personal interactions and relationships with people. So the way to kind of stand out in today's competitive environment is to build that personal relationship, and that's really what people are going to be missing and craving as we continue to automate more and more.
Absolutely, Ben. And it is challenging, though, for people within sales that they'll have their own sales targets. They'll be pushed from sales managers and sales leaders to close those sales. So, how do you balance those sales targets and being genuine with that need and that desire to connect with people and make sure you're providing the best possible service for them? What's that balance of being genuine like, do we think?
Yeah, I can kind of keep going with this one. So, one thing I've sort of identified in my career and my experience is not to be tied to outcomes or activities. I think a lot of times salespeople are hyper focused on I have to hit a certain number of activity metrics, or I need to push a conversation a certain way, or I have a certain outcome in mind that I'm really trying to steer the conversation towards. What I found works a lot better is just spending the time to really understand the situation that someone's in, and sort of going in with the mindset of I'm trying to help, and if I can't, that's okay, and being upfront and honest about that I'm here to support and understand, and if I'm not a good fit, we're not a good fit. I think people genuinely resonate to that, and don't feel like they're being sold to when it's just trying to understand, hey, could I be a good fit for you or not?
Which in every way will build trust, won't it? Because the more you're presenting that, that's some of the things we talk about later in our presentation today, is that need for honesty and transparency. So I think that when we're building rapport and we're doing that authentically, as we've identified here, sometimes it will even be difficult prospects. The art of sales is you'll be often dealing with people who might be skeptical or distracted or guarded around the process, or simply not like you in that first instance. And we have to overcome that in our challenge to figure out if we are a good fit for them. And it's a mindset of curiosity and not control. So here at Sales Geek, we identify that there are really four areas and ways that we build that rapport. And the first is listening skills, so listening like a pro. and make most people think they are good listeners, but really they're just waiting for their turn to speak rather than engaging and reflecting back the conversation and how it's gone. But true listening is one of the fastest ways to build trust. And poor listening of interrupting or making assumptions can really damage that trust and damage that understanding. So a power technique of reflective listening can often be to say, well, what I'm hearing is that time is a big pressure right now. Have I understood that correctly? And then you're reflecting back the challenges back to those customers. I think secondly, then we have match and mirror, which is to subtly, sorry, I've lost those, to subtly reflect back the connection you have with those customers and make sure that you're responding in the same way. If you're very high energy with somebody that's very low energy, that you've probably not judged the sense of the conversation quite correctly. And back to what we were saying before around asking questions, we need to ask better questions. We need to swap questions for things like, what is your budget, to what is the right solution for you right now? And then we can get deeper into those price questions that might be the first thing on our customers or sales reps' mind that we're dealing with. And then it's about profile awareness. Not everyone communicate likes you, and that's okay. And we need to understand basic human behavior. And one of the key things that we work with at Sales Geek is a DISC framework of D for dominance, which is direct, fast-paced, and results-focused. I of influence, which is energetic and social, people-focused. S of steadiness, calm, supportive, methodical. And C, compliance, detail-oriented, cautious or accuracy-driven. So who are we understanding that we're talking to in these environments and these conversations? So from these key 4 areas of building rapport, I want to bring this back to the panel and ask, what's one question you always ask to help deepen a conversation? How do you get to that crux of this? How do you deepen the conversation?
Yeah, Owen, I'll jump in and lead on this one. I think with a lot of the people we engage with, which are small, medium-sized businesses for the most part, it is around trying to have people visualize what the future would look like around a solution, right? Talking to these CEOs and founders that we work with and going, help me, what does success look like? What would that mean to you as an owner? And many times it's like, things that keep them up at night. And if we could help solve some of that if you could just help this go away, it gets a lot of conversation going. I always love using that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ben, I'm going to come to you with this question next, because you mentioned around it being around price point, and you might be having that challenge straight away. So how do you build rapport when someone is closed off or skeptical, or that is their first step? What techniques do you use to build that rapport that we've discussed?
Yeah, I think especially for situations where they're asking price right up front, which I think for a lot of salespeople is a very common experience. What I've typically seen work is where you say, we will get to the pricing, but it's better to understand exactly what you're looking for and the experience and what we can provide and what outcomes you're looking for. And then from there, once I understand what you're looking for, then we can get you a more accurate price. But for me to give you a real good view, I need to understand what you're looking for better, and just sort of taking price off the table right away. And then when you're having the conversation, one of the techniques we talk about at Sales Geek all the time that I absolutely love and works really well is ask the question and then question the answer. So ask those things and then continuing to dig deeper and to understand exactly what they're looking for, because price becomes a lesser issue once they start to realize the experience that they're looking for, and then you can have a better conversation around what value you can provide.
Because if we're always just talking about price, we're never going to get to those conversations about value, right? There's always going to be that blocker if it's just purely price driven. Jerry, I'm going to come to you. Are there common mistakes that you've seen salespeople make when trying to build rapport? And is it something around this value proposition and getting to the challenges of understanding pain points of customers?
Yeah, I think when we see sales reps, if they just enter the company, especially, and they go through training, we always like to do role plays, right? So that's kind of a standard training that you do with a sales rep for any product or service that you want to sell. And when you do that role play, what you realize is they're just kind of regurgitating everything that they learned, right? And that's good for them to remember the value proposition, everything we're trying to do. But what they really should be doing right off the bat is to ask those open-ended questions and find out what's really important to that customer. And when they do that, then all the stuff that they learned through training, they can kind of supplement and be able to try to solve a solution. So to me, that's the biggest challenge for a sales rep right now is being able to bring it back and build that rapport before you even get into a discussion on what this product is and our service and what it does and how it works and all that stuff. Stop just kind of barfing all over the customer with features and benefits and things like that, and truly understand what the customer's need is.
I think that's a really interesting point. I'm just going to, as Ben says, question the to keep questioning the answer there. And I think we do talk about features and benefits too much. How do we really talk around those values? How do we get across the impact that our product or service is having, rather than just talking around those features and benefits? Can any of you talk around what a really good way of getting to that meat of that conversation is?
Yeah. Oh, and again, it's getting to know the customer, right? And I think, a little bit of prep work ahead of it. So depending on how, you may be in a position where you need to make a bunch of cold calls every day, hundreds of them or whatever it might be, or you may be lining up a customer that you have a long period of time before you need to before you actually meet with them. So how do you do some prep work at the beginning to learn about them, care about them more than you care about yourself or what product you're selling? Hear what they're having a problem with, and then how do you match up your solution with what their problems are? And I think if you do that, you're going to build rapport and you're going to have a much better time during that sales cycle.
Hey, Jerry, I'm going to jump on one of these things. I love this slide, Owen. Um, difficult prospects are everywhere. I just want to hone in on it. I think the one piece that maybe could be added, maybe it's above listen like a pro, is like prepare like a pro for your call. I think that's where Jerry was going. Is there is so much that goes into preparing, and a lot of salespeople, right? I've got a long list. I got to get through 25 account calls today. I got to go. I got to make 25 cold calls. I would argue that if 25 is the number, if you had 12 really good ones versus 25 so-so ones, right? You would be in better shape as a company, as an organization, as a culture, selling culture, if you were instilling kind of more of that, let's do it right and create better relationships. But that comes with preparation and pre-plan. And we won't get into all of it today, but we talk about this a lot here in the Colorado market and across the nation for that matter, is that there's so many tools there today that salespeople can use to prepare better. If that is, there's some AI tools out there that will look at LinkedIn profiles and then tell you how to sell to that individual, because we're all different. We're all wired different. And some people want more rapport, but others will want a different type of selling approach. And I think using some of the tools that are out there today to help you kind of have more meaningful conversations in a quicker amount of time is about the preparation and pre-plan. So many tools out there that can help you do that as a better to make create a better selling organization. But prepare like a pro, I think is one of the things that might need to be added here.
I absolutely agree with that, Brian. I think it's a really good insight, and you're absolutely right. There are more and more tools now than ever before to do that. So this leads us on to trust and building trust that sticks. Once we've developed that rapport, we've researched well, we've made the connection, and we've listened to their challenges, how are we going to build trust? And at Sales Geek, we talk about the three C's, which are credibility, consistency, and care. So firstly, with credibility, do you know what you're talking about? Are you credible in this conversation? And then are you consistent? Do you show up the same way every time? Or are you early for some meetings, late for others, knowledgeable in one thing and then don't get back and don't answer questions? So how do you be more consistent in every call? And I think this has already been mentioned in some detail. It's around caring, genuinely caring about your customer's problem. And if we can do that, there are three other techniques. which are using vulnerability to build trust, and saying perhaps things like, I don't know, but I'll find out, being open and transparent around, rather than just trying to rush in and give an answer which then later has to be corrected. That's not necessarily to be weak or receive vulnerability as weakness, but to see it as an opportunity to be open and honest and transparent. And then we look at things like social proof and testimonials, and making sure that we are backing up, that people can see, as I was mentioning before, how we demonstrate the value of what we've been doing. And then within that, manage expectations, always being honest about timelines, pricing, and outcomes in the sales cycle. Because I've pulled across here that trust killers are really overselling, ghosting, being inconsistent, adding pressure to the customer, or ignoring that it is a human on the other end of the call or the conversation. So if that's how we're going to use the process of the 3 Cs to build out trust, I want to ask you as the panel, how do you personally demonstrate credibility early in a sales conversation? How do you to get people to understand that you are these things of really knowledgeable about what you're talking about? Brian, I'm going to come to you on this one first.
Yeah, no, I think that's good, Owen. I'll lead on this one. I think building credibility is certainly got to know who you're talking to, right? I've done sales for a long time. I don't think anybody does care about that, right? At the end of the day, it's about just letting them know that you have done what you're doing for a lot of customers, and that you have a process to help them to make it individual, like Ben was talking, make them feel special. But I think when you do that, you can kind of go, I've been there, been in this seat, done this with a number of different customers, but I want to hear you tell me your story so we can make sure we get to the right solution. And I think if you can eloquently do that, you're off to a really good start. And then you're always now in the listening seat. And that's a great, powerful place to be, is letting your the person you're trying to sell tell you what they're looking for. And you can move things pretty quickly.
Yeah, I completely agree, Brian. I think that's absolutely correct. And one of the things that I've seen a lot in my career helping newer salespeople or someone who's switching careers and starting with a new company, one of the challenges I've seen a lot of times for a newer sales rep is, well, how do I show credibility? For all of us on the panel, we've been in sales for 20, 30 years, so we have a lot of experience. But if you're brand new to the profession or brand new to the industry, that's a challenge. How do I show my credibility? And a lot of times, what I work with younger or newer salespeople to the role is, it's not about saying the right things a lot of times. It's about asking the right questions. As Brian said, is putting yourself in that seat of, I'm here to listen, I'm here to learn, I'm here to understand your situation. Because that is going to be a better way to build credibility, in an easier way. It's going to be a lot harder to know the right things to say all the time, but it's a lot easier to learn the right questions to ask and help guide that conversation.
Yeah, Ben, I just remember being in both at a managerial seat and also my own personal seat, is that if you're a young salesperson, right, and you go around the introductions of, like, tell me all about, that little introduction part of the meetings. It just makes me shiver when I think about some of these young salespeople going, they go on for 5 to 7 minutes about telling the person you're selling, like, how great they are, right? Versus just a very simple approach of, been there, done this, and I've grown a lot of businesses. And so let's get down to hearing about your problems. We tend to always want to just tell everybody about us.
And I would just pick up there about, how do you manage expectations then? If you've managed to convince somebody of your credibility, but you want to develop your consistency, how do you manage expectations on a sales call and be that transparent way that builds trust?
So, Owen, I think this gets complicated, right? Everything's busy, the quotas are high, people need to keep going after it. When you sell something, the question always goes, when are you going to sell the next whatever it is? So the only way I've seen around this, right, is to be present. So we talk a lot about being present, active listening with the customer and things like that, but also to be available. Now, I know today we like to talk about boundaries and work-life balance, and all those things are important. I'm not trying to negate that in any way, but I personally am available almost all the time. Okay, I'll turn my phone off at night, right, when I'm going to bed. But I do leave my phone on or let people know that they can reach out to me even if it's on the weekend and things like that. And knowing that I'm there, I'm available, and I'm trying to help them out. Now, of course, I'll have the right work-life balance, and if I'm with my family and I can't answer the phone right now, I'll let them know. I'll call them back later, whatever it is. But I am always trying to be present and available to my customers, my clients, my team, whatever it might be, so that they know they can get a hold of me when they need help.
That's great. And it sounds like then the key to that is being really clear with that communication as well, of being upfront about, if I can't answer right now, when can I? So I'm going to ask you, as the three of you as a panel, are there any times where you feel that you've lost trust in a process? And that can be somebody perhaps who's lost trust with you, but also somebody reframing it around, has there been times where you've lost trust in working with somebody in a sales environment, and then that the impact that's had and what's needed to happen to rebuild it as part of that process? Is there any advice for anybody that's watching today on that?
Yeah, I can jump in on this, Owen. I think one thing I've noticed is a shift in the sales process and the buying cycle. I think the days of one conversation purchases are just falling down. Like it used to be, you could talk to someone one time, a purchase took place, and you're off and doing business. Now there's multiple decision makers involved, there's multiple conversations involved in order to move things along. And what I've sort of found, even with myself, is if I'm not doing a good job of managing expectations, that like, okay, this is what I want to accomplish in this conversation. The next conversation is going to be focused on this, and this is who should be involved in this conversation, and here's what we're going to cover. And if you're not sort of walking someone through that buying process and explaining to them, and you're leaving it very vague and open, I've found that customers are lost of what to do next, and that loses that trust and credibility of what you're doing. So what I've found that's really helped with that is really kind of slowing down and taking it step by step, but then also over communicating of exactly what's happening and when things take place, so that way the customer feels guided along their journey.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ben. I think that's really insightful.
Yeah, Ben or Owen, I'll just jump real quickly on that one. I think one of the other things I'll just tag on to Ben's is when you're in a selling buying situation, um I don't think we have to be scared of the fact that we are in a selling situation. We're trying to sell them future. We're trying to sell them that we have something that's of value to them, and if it's implemented correctly, it can be extremely powerful for their business or for whatever the solution may be. I think it's okay to just, as Ben said, is guide them through the process. Let them know what the expectations are. Let them understand kind of what that road looks like and what they need to be supplying on their side for a successful end to whatever that is. That might be needing new people into the meetings or different people, decision makers the next time around. But I think when you do that, it helps you build the credibility of the full value process that you're bringing to the table. So being honest and upfront about that, I think, can make sure that things don't get off track.
Absolutely. Yeah, completely understand that, Brian. And I think a lot of the things we've discussed there bring us back to a level of listening and understanding. So have we really got to the bottom of what the challenge is? So at Sales Geek, we talk about the 5 levels of listening, which increase. So the first one is the gist. Does what the person is saying fit with my own views? Can I conceptualize it? But then have I listened long enough until I hear a trigger for me to talk? So am I understanding it so I can reply rather than just wait for the next turn to speak? And then we have logic, listening to understand the logic in their situation and why they're thinking the way that they're thinking. The next level higher than this is, of course, understanding emotion and why it's important to them on an emotional level of why what are these challenges. And if we can do that, then we're probably in a position where we can listening in order to put ourselves in their shoes and see their worldview. And that doesn't mean in these steps of listening that we necessarily agree with everything that they've said, but at least we're open and have listened to those challenges so that we can better understand from our own perspective to do it. And when we move through these cycles, we move from the levels of most likely to listen to then most likely to be able to understand. So by the time we get somebody else's perspective, we've probably got a really good understanding of their problem. So what I want to drill down to in your answers now are there ways that you've used active listening in this process of the 5 levels of listening to over your sales career, and how have they made improvements for you personally? So what's the biggest difference you found from using active listening techniques like this? And Ben, why don't I come to you on this first? What would you say that the biggest impact of using active listening in a sales role for you has been?
Yeah, this is something that Jerry brought up earlier when he was talking about features and benefits and talking about that part. What I've found that's really helpful, and a mistake that a lot of salespeople make, is they'll hear something right away and they'll immediately connect. This is my chance to talk about how my product could solve that right here. And they immediately go into pitching and selling mode, in which that point they've kind of lost the customer because they jumped on it a little too early. So what I've found that helps, and that I've seen help others, is just listen and hear it and jot them down, and then with the idea of, hey, I want to get to 3 to 5 things I want to talk about before I start talking. So like continue to ask and continue to dig until I feel like I have 5 talking points. And then and only then can I start to go in to start talking about what my service or product offering does for them. Because then it's not you're jumping on the first thing you hear, you're actively looking for 5 things to actively talk about, which then is encouraging you as the salesperson to focus more time on asking questions, which then gets to more of that POV approach.
And perhaps that level of reflection where you're saying those 5 things back to the customer that shows them that they've understood it, helps to build that trust and really gets them to understand the problem, and they start to feel that you do understand their point of view, that moving through this journey is around your customer believing this as well. You don't want to feel like you understand their point of view, but them feel that you understand the gist of what they're saying. So very much a process there. Completely agree. So have you ever experienced, the 3 of you, where you feel like you're zoning out in a conversation or drifting, or suddenly an idea pops into your head about something else you have to do later? What are your ways around that? How do you make sure that you're not zoning out and you're not just waiting to speak? Are there any tips or tricks you can pass on here of making sure, or does it just further add to what Ben was saying there around being in, and Jerry was saying, being present and in the moment?
Yeah, I'll jump on this one, Owen. I think that's a great question. It's one that certainly I've been there, right? You've been in these long sales calls and they're just meandering along. Um, I think it goes back, and I'm a big fan of this. We talk about it a lot with customers, with salespeople, is the preparation pre-plan. Like, what are the 3 or 4 questions? What are the 3 or 4 things you're trying to solve for? Um, and I think in the effort of just being a really good steward of people's time, like, you need to kind of keep the pace of the meeting going. I've seen salespeople just continue to ask more questions because they feel like there's the ask more questions, and it's like at a point in time there's an art to kind of going, okay, great. Let me tell you a little bit about what my solution can do for you, and then rehash some of the things they've done. But long way of saying it, Owen. I think you as a salesperson or a salesperson needs to, like, you own that time. You've been granted that time from the buyer, be it 30 minutes, an hour, couple hour presentation. That's a gift. And so within that gift, you have to now kind of be a steward of that time and that person's time, that team's time, to really make sure that you're not wasting it. And so you have to kind of take ownership of it.
Absolutely. And I'm sure we've all been on that environment where there's a half-an-hour call booked and you're still on that call half an hour later going, I'm sure they just feel they've got to use this time, rather than actually this could have been 5 minutes if we just got to the point sooner.
Well,
So
yeah, and I think you had on a previous slide about I think as salespeople, we build trust and rapport by being on time, being prepared, but also being a steward if it's a 30-minute meeting to be done at 25 minutes in, and making sure that we've got a really solid follow-up list. I've been through so many calls where the meeting goes long, all of a sudden the guy or the gal is going, "Hey, I got to go to my next meeting," and there's no solid follow-up
Mm.
around what's next. And I think those are the worst calls.
Absolutely. And I had an experience the other day where somebody called me and offered a service and chatted through it. And I explained to them that I was partially interested, but not at this time. And I wasn't going to be committing to it. And they very quickly got off the phone. And they were very much like, right, great, thanks very much. And almost put the phone down. And I thought, well, I have shown some interest here. You've lost an opportunity by just making it really clear that if I'm not going to pay today, you're not interested. You've got to show and build that relationship, haven't you? Of this might need another call. Let's check back in the future. That's a call to action. I'll circle back to this. But if you're just very quick to be, no sale today, I'm going to get off the call, you haven't really done those things that you were talking about there, Brian, and built that trust for the future. So this brings us back to some of the quick talking points that we've covered today and that we've looked at already, which is, of course, being attentive, giving people your full attention, to show respect and value, being genuinely interested in other people and taking that interest in what their pain points are, what the problems are for the customers, and how you solve them. Being understanding, acknowledging their feelings and perspectives without judgment when we've used the 5 steps of our listening skills. Be honest and transparent. And I think this leads back to when we talked around care and consistency, and particularly credibility. That are we being as transparent and honest as we can be? We need to develop a positive body language, so give non-verbal cues when we're listening, to make sure that we're reflecting in some of those ways. But I think we also need to be confident in the process. We need to build that trust and be balanced with humility that this might not be going the way we want, but we will believe that in what we're doing, and believe in that success. Would start with a positive mindset and believing that the conversation will go well. So just on each of these different areas, I've got sort of a separate question, and I'll go through them individually. But how, when we're looking at a mindset focus, how important is it to start conversations you believe will succeed? And I think we mentioned before about being a young salesperson. How do you do that? How do you train yourself to be confident even in the times when things aren't going well?
Well, Owen, I think one of the things I think about in my past, especially working with young salespeople, is um, not every sales call is um, you know, the end of the battle, right? There's this kind of longer term thing. Every call can generate understanding, learnings, potential to re-engage. Maybe you had an idea going in that you were going to sell some kind of solution, right? You go in there with that preparation and pre-plan, and when you get there, you quickly realize that that plan is not the right plan, and you have a potential to, like you said, just kind of stop and go home. But I think you continue to ask questions, you continue to learn more. And if your plan was not the right plan, I think people do want to hear going, "Hey, I wasn't really thinking about this today, Owen, the right way, but I'm coming back in. I would like, if you're okay with this, come back to talk to you in a week, follow up with you, because I'm hearing something different than what I thought coming in, and I want to come back and give you a really more on purpose plan that's right for what you're telling me today."
And Jerry, I'm going to come to you and pick up some of Brian's excellent points there. Um, Particularly about thinking about starting out. And often people in a sales role will have to do cold calling or have to do a lot of things where it's repetitive no's time and time again. How does that, I'm sure, will affect confidence? So how do you just keep believing that you're going to be successful and that this is going to eventually work and you're going to find the right customer? Can you give any mindset tools for people on this watching today, and how you would overcome those challenges?
Yeah, so I think, if you can't handle rejection, you're in the wrong profession, right? Because sales is full of rejection more times than success, right? So to overcome that, I think there's power in positivity, right? You have to believe that you are going to get a breakthrough at some point. You have to persevere. So, all these buzzwords of positivity, perseverance, things like that. It's true, right? Because even when you fail, you learn from that, right? You got to pick yourself up, you got to keep going, and you learn the next time. Don't repeat that same mistake, or approach this customer in a different way. We've given a lot of techniques through this call so far. So again, the most important thing is positivity. Whether you fail or not, stay positive and get better for the next times. And that's so important, especially early in your sales career. You really have to train yourself to do that, because you're going to get a lot of rejections, especially early on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and to add to that, Jerry and Brian, I think what I've seen a lot for salespeople is what they define as success versus what everyone else defines as success is very different things. So I'll use this as an example, and I've shared this many times with people, is if you take a look at the Beatles, I think everyone would probably say the Beatles are probably the most successful musical band of all time. But if you were to take a look at, like, by numbers, only 9% of the songs that they ever released became hit songs. So if you were to look at success metrics, you could say the Beatles failed 91% of the times on the songs that they wrote. But you consider that 9% making them the greatest rock band of all time. So when you reframe what success looks like, especially going into sales, and you say, hey, if I'm able to close 9% of the customers I'm in front of, that's Beatles level of success. And if you start thinking about it that way, then you don't think about it as rejection. You think about it as, this is part of the process. Everyone who's successful faces rejection. That's just how you have to look at how to be a successful person.
And to follow on
Love
from that,
that.
I absolutely love that. And there's that Michael Jordan quote, isn't there, about the amount of times that he failed to become so great within the game. It's about understanding that failure to be able to do it. And I think the final point I want to make on this slide is just around that positive body language. And in looking at reading the room, what does the role body language play in your key to building trust and consistently managing non-verbal signals? That's going to be part of that believing in success, isn't it? It's not just enough to say it, we've got to show it to people as well. Have you any tips that any of you on how to demonstrate that body language to other people, your customers?
Yeah, Owen, I'll start here, right? Because early in my career, I did not understand this at all. And I remember I'd be in meetings all the time, and my manager pulled me out and said, Jerry, you agreed on all this stuff, but your body language said something completely different. And I would start getting really frustrated, because I said, well, I agreed we're going to go do all these things and whatever it is, but my heart wasn't in it. My body wasn't in it. My mind wasn't in it, the whole thing. And my manager knew that, right? So your body will betray you if you're not careful, right? So it took me a lot of effort and practice to really work through that in a big way. Again, and this is kind of the theme of the whole thing that we're doing here, is you got to be genuine, right? So if you are not open to direction or other ideas or other possibilities, and you're constantly closing yourself off, it has to be your way or no way, your body's going to betray you, and you're not going to do it, and it's going to be very hard to control that, and people will pick up on that, and you won't build rapport, and you won't close the deal. So you have to be open. You have to care more about that customer or that client or whatever it is that you're working about, to keep an open mind of, I can help this person. I know I can solve this problem and help them. Your body will then move in that direction, and you'll be able to kind of build that rapport very quickly with that person.
Yeah, Jerry, that's awesome. Just self-reflection on just your answer there. I was like, most successful times I have been in my sales career is when I'm absolutely passionate about the solutions I'm selling. I think it can quickly come across if you're not all in on the solution you're selling. People will see it, people will recognize it. I don't know if you can, I know personally, I can't fake it. That I'm, excited about a solution that I'm not excited about. And so I think as salespeople, as you're thinking about a sales career, aligning yourselves with things, solutions, products, services that you're super passionate about. And if those two things align, I think really good things happen.
Absolutely, that's great insight there from both of you. Thank you. So we're starting to reach the end of our time today in our call. And I just want to ask the panel if there are things you want to reflect on that we've not covered yet, and I'll come back to you to answer those or talk about them. But for a Sales Geek, we look at steps and things and advice that we can give as key in help really and key instruction that will help us in this process to build rapport and trust. And we identify these as what is the benefit to the other person? I think we've covered that in quite a lot of detail around caring, understanding, trying to get to the root cause of that person's problem. And frame conversations so that the benefit to the other person is clear, even if it's a small one. Focus on the direction of the conversation. This is back to something Brian said earlier around making sure we have an end goal, a call to action. What are we going to follow up with? And take ownership of that and show that consistency. Are you helping it flow towards understanding and solutions and connection? Or are you just reacting? And trust grows when people sense that you are intentional and not random in how you move the conversation forward. So we need to focus on the positives and create a safe space. How do we create this environment where we can be open and trusting of each other within that environment? And then finally, what's next? Always help the other person in the conversation to see what's next. Even if it's only small, even if it's agreeing to think about something to have another chat, give next steps, builds confidence towards being purposeful and complete. And it helps to build that confidence and move the relationship forward. So I just want to ask each of you sort of your thoughts on those 4 steps. And if there's anything else you'd like to add or expand upon in the sort of final section of this call in how you build trust and rapport over a longer period.
Owen, I'll lead here. I love that last one there. What's next? I think there's multiple ways salespeople can use that. Are you okay if I do X, right? Are you okay if I, follow up, if I send you a sample? Are you okay with kind of whatever the next step is? Part of sales is about getting the other person to get comfortable saying yes. And it doesn't mean that they're signing the PO or however way you think about closing a deal. It's getting them to agree to something that you're proposing. So it's now becomes easier for them the next time around to continue to move this forward. So I love the what's next. Are you okay with me doing X as a follow-up? But once they start saying yes, then you can build on yeses to help close deals faster.
Great. Thank you, Brian. That really insightful there. Jerry, Ben, anything to add from yourselves?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing here is patience, right? I think we talked a little bit earlier about these, one meeting closes and how it's going away. And I agree with that because, again, depending on your industry, but many of these industries, they've been burned, right? You got sales reps coming in, promising the world, selling something that a customer can't use or it's unusable or whatever it might be, and they're not getting the value out of it that they wanted to. So I think it's really important to have some patience through this, right? You want to build that rapport and you want to be there. You want to be present. We talked about it throughout this call here. Have some patience and follow through. The what's next as Brian just said, that's so important because again, I've sold a lot of capital equipment before. So the last thing you want to do is sell a piece of equipment and walk away, and you don't know if that customer is using it, if it's working, getting the most out of it. Make sure that it is. Have some patience, have some follow through. That's how you build a rapport, and that's how you're going to get that repeat customer.
Brilliant. Love that, Jerry. Thank you. And finally, Ben, coming to you on this. What are
Yeah,
your thoughts?
completely agree with everything Jerry, Brian, and everything that's on here. The other thing I would add to this too is making sure that you're taking your time to give value back. I think Brian said it earlier that it's a gift to be able to be an opportunity to meet with your customers and have these meetings, and knowing that you're going to close less sales than conversations that you have. But if you're constantly going in with the mindset of I'm looking to give value to the people that I'm meeting with, whether it be an introduction, a referral for someone to introduce in their business, some advice that they could take and implement immediately that's going to improve their business. I'm even going back to your example that you had, Owen, where you showed interest and they just hung up the phone and they were ready to move on. By planting those seeds to say that every no is a not yet and not just a no for good, by adding value, by constantly trying to give to them. Really what your goal in sales to be is you want to be the first company they think of when the time is right to do something, or they come across someone who has a need and they can refer to you. So the only way you can really stay top of mind is by giving more than you're asking for. So giving value at all times of your conversations is a great way to build that rapport and trust.
I love that. And I think that's a great way to end this conversation around providing that value. So thank you all. Thank you everyone who's joined this webinar, and we hope you've enjoyed it. And it's been a fascinating conversation and discussion, and I've certainly really enjoyed it. A key part of us listening here at Sales Geek is actively, genuinely wanting feedback. We would love to hear what you think about this session today. It only makes us better for the future, and we want to learn about your challenges, about any way we help and get feedback. So there's a QR code on screen that you can use to give us the feedback on today's session. I'm also showing the email addresses of our 3 expert panelists. You can reach out to them directly. You can go on LinkedIn and find them. We'd love you to engage with us. That would be absolutely fantastic. We also have a series of these webinars. Our next one is on the 16th of July at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And it's a Life in Sales, advice from sales geeks across the UK. So we hope we can join us for that. And we, again, hope to be sharing tremendous value around sales and sales process and sales insight. You can also follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, and make sure to sign up for our Eventbrite page. So if you've enjoyed today, you'll be contacted around the next webinar and know when the next ones are coming. So final things to say are thank you again to our panelists. You've been absolutely fantastic. It's been a really insightful discussion around building trust and rapport. And I have a great rapport with all of you and trust all of you implicitly. So thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed it today, and thanks for joining. I hope you have a great rest of the day.